I'm Jim Collison, and live from the Gallup studios here in Omaha, Nebraska. This is Gallup's Call to Coach, recorded on November 17th, 2017. Call to Coach is a resource for those who want to help others discover and use their strengths. We have Gallup experts and independent strengths coaches share tactics, insights, and strategies to help coaches maximize the talent of individuals, teams, and organizations around the world. If you do have questions during our live webcast, we have a chat room that's available for you right below the main video window. If you just look down there, there's a little chat room down there to log in. Not very difficult, to be honest. Bottom left-hand corner, there's a little login button. You can select that. Choose the guest account. You don't have to create a new account. You can log in with any variety of social accounts. So if you want to log in with Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn, any of those, you can do that as well. But if you don't want to do that, just choose the guest account, take the name out and the numbers, put your name in. That way we can call you by name. You can call your question as you have them in the chat room. Then hit log in and you are in the chat room. It's as easy as that. Love to have you. Bring your questions to us. If you're listening to the recorded version or have questions about custom strengths coaching solutions, you can contact us as well. Send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. Really, for all questions, that's the best email address to use. Again, that's coaching@gallup.com. Don't forget to visit the Gallup Strengths Center, just gallupstrengthscenter.com, for all your Clifton Strengths coaching resources and training needs. Hey, by the way, if you're listening live, this is one of those benefits. We have some changes coming this weekend at the Strengths Center, some new things. So you might want to pay attention to what's going on in our Facebook groups. Because we will be announcing them there. You only heard it here if you came live. So pretty cool. You can also catch the video and both streaming and downloadable audio for offline listening. We call that podcasting, by the way. It's just a podcast. Maybe you've heard of that. All the links to be able to do that, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, Google Play, and iTunes, all available on our coaches blog. Head over to coaching.gallup.com. Click on the resources tab. Steve Sweary is our guest today. Steve works as the internal communications guy for Hennepin County, Minnesota. Steve, great to have you on Call to Coach, and welcome.
Well, thank you, Jim. It's really great to be here. I'm excited. I've been a big fan of the show, so it's kind of nice to get to see it from the inside.
And see the sausage, right? The way the sausage is made. It's
exactly.
Everybody makes that comment to me all the time when they're a part of the pre-show and they come in and they're like, "Oh, I thought you did more in the pre-show." No, we just kind of hang out and talk, but it's always a good opportunity to get to know you. Let's get to know you a little bit. Tell me a little bit about your background, the job that you do, and maybe sprinkle in your top 5 in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's go ahead. I'll start with my top 5. So intellection, strategic, ideation, input, and learner. So all 5 in the strategic thinking. And I think that's why when I first took the assessment, I was skeptical of StrengthsFinders. But it wasn't until I started getting training and digging deeper that I really learned to love it. And now I'm fortunate that my boss was smart enough to send me to go get trained, and now I get to do that work here at Hennepin County. I started with Hennepin about 5 years ago. And came from a kind of different background. I'd never worked in government. I was a professional actor for 20 years, working mostly in theater, working for places like the Guthrie Theater, the Jungle Theater, some big regional theaters here in Minnesota, and then some other places around, but did some other on-camera work and things like that. And it was when my daughter was born that I really realized that theater is a terrible schedule for a parent. And so I started looking for more of a day job so that I could actually be home my nights and weekends, and happened to come across Hennepin County. They were looking to change things up. They have always been very good about external communication, but we are a huge organization, and sometimes our right hand doesn't know what our left hand is doing. And so they were looking to try and change things up, and my boss thought he would take a risk. And even though I don't have a lot of communications background, I came in with, I think, a little bit different thinking, and we've just kind of run with it. So it's been fun, and 5 years on, I'm still here, so I'm obviously doing something right, I guess.
Yeah, Steve, one of the questions I see on our Facebook group all the time is, people will jump in and say, "Oh, I'm all strategic." And right now, it's You're all strategic, and yet you're in a
Yep.
communications role. So
It's true.
tell me I know how you reconcile that, but tell the audience, how do you reconcile that? Because that would seem, for some people, that might seem a little weird.
Well, and that's kind of what I thought at first. In fact, that was some of my initial skepticism, was because that top 5 seemed like a single facet of who I was as a person. And it didn't really get down there. It wasn't until I went to coaching and I got my full 34 and I saw that individualization and empathy were my 6 and 7, and started seeing a lot of those influencing and relationship building. But even when I was an actor, I think the way that I went at it, which, everybody chooses a different path to get where they need to go. But for me, a lot of it was up here in my head first before it found its way into my body, so to speak. I was known for doing an awful lot of research into a role before I got there. But then, I always say that empathy really kind of illuminates everything else for me. And it allowed me to land in those roles and really kind of absorb myself in them in a way, so long as I did the research first. And I think that's really, when it comes to communication, a lot of what I do here is I research, what do we need to tell people? And then once I know what we need to say, then I kind of look to the heart to try and figure out what's the best way to say it. I'm a big fan of humor. I am a big fan of very conversational communication. Oftentimes, I think big organizations worry too much that it's going to be, they want to be formal. A lot gets lost in formality. People get bored, they don't read it. If you can say it so it sounds like it's one person talking to another person, it's amazing how well that message can come across. So that's some of the stuff that I've been trying to introduce. I've introduced a lot of video to the county. The idea that, again, I can look you right in the eye and tell you what I want you to hear, and it comes across a lot more personal than me sending you an email. I love the fact that we are now in a day and age where people are so used to picking up their phone and looking at a video. They watch things on YouTube. It doesn't have to be the super high-end quality. It's nice when it's good quality, but people care less about that than they do about what's the message, what's the content. And so I really started to stress to people, it's okay to be on camera, and don't worry about if it's perfect. Don't worry if you look like a movie star. Get your message out there in a way that people can see it and hear it, and they're going to feel it a lot more.
Yeah. Do you guys have a regular podcast or a regular way of communicating that way so people can consume it like a podcast or can see it on YouTube?
We do a lot of things in our department. Again, we are one department, so we do an awful lot of video for our department. One of the things that we've started to do is, a few years ago, we had an event that we wanted, the county recorder wanted to do basically this educational session with a speaker. We brought her in, and he wanted to share it with recorders across the state. And we couldn't do it because of the firewall issues. So we didn't have a tool. So my friend Robert started doing some research. He found a great webcasting tool, and we introduced it to the county, and we've been using that. That's now snowballed. We recently started we used to have these all-staff meetings that were brutal. They were people standing at the podium, just PowerPoint and just chatting. They were boring. We took those over and we started to shake things up. We now have been doing some of them. That are only webinars. So the only way to watch them is online. We have musical guests. We treat it more like a late night talk show. We bring them in, we interview them. We add humorous content, videos, things like that. They're wildly popular. It's just been great.
Yeah, well, I'd love to say we've been doing this that way for a long time. So it's exciting to see, other people pick up on it. We find that in its long form, it's just a little more interesting that way, and,
Yep.
and people stay engaged a little bit longer. I do get a lot of comments to shorten things up, and I just won't do it because it's worth the content. It's worth the time. There's
Yep.
a Carl Newport wrote a book called Deep Work. And I think sometimes we shorten things up too much in our world. Hey, can you tell me everything I need to know about the theme of woo in 1 minute? Well, no, actually, I can't. It's much deeper than that. We actually need to spend a much more time. So I always appreciate our listeners who really grind through the content to get it. I'm sure you're finding too. If you can make it interesting and listenable, you'll get a lot of information communicated very, very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. It's if you build it, they will come.
Yeah.
And I think that's really true. And, if you put it into a package that is consumable and entertaining and satisfying, they'll keep coming back.
Yeah. Steve, do you have woo or communication in your top 10?
I don't. I am, in fact, my woo, I think, is in my 20s. Communication is about 15. So no, I use a lot of the other things that I've got to build upon it.
Oh, that's great to hear, because you would think a communications, specialist, director, whatever you want to say it, would, I think a lot of people make this assumption, oh, well, you must have woo or communication, and you don't. And so we often talk a lot about strengths not being what you do, but how you do it. And so you just said it perfectly. You just said, nope, I've got some other things. Love the empathy approach to this, right? In your role of kind of feeling and understanding how the community is feeling about things. That must trigger for you early warning device that says, hey, we might need to do some things to get ahead of some of these feelings that may be coming. Does that happen?
Absolutely. All the time. And it's, and I don't know, that is it nature or nurture, if it's something that you pick up. But I'll tell you, when you're doing live theater, you learn to read the room. You can tell when they're with you and when they're not. And I find that's very true if I'm in front of a group of 8 people or if I'm in front of 200 people. You really have to feel the energy of the room and then change things up. Don't be afraid to, get stuck on, don't be afraid to make a change on the fly. Scripts are great to have as an outline, but don't be afraid to chuck them out the window if you need to find another way to bring that audience back.
Yeah, we got a little bit ahead of ourselves. I want to stay in this thought, though. We're going to talk a little bit about what's going on there in Hennepin County and how we're doing it with strengths. But there was a question in the chat room, and how do you use? What else are you doing? We talked about using videos and some other. From a communication standpoint, are there other things that you guys are using that you're finding effective in communicating both strengths and other messages out to the community?
Yeah, I would say we're working a lot harder with, the county has a great facilitation program. We work on, if people are familiar with TOPS facilitation method, we send an awful lot of people to go and learn to be good facilitators, to get into the room and help that conversation move forward. Anytime that we can bring people together, either online, but even better, face-to-face in the room, it's amazing how much you can accomplish by really getting that conversation rich and sometimes just having again, you need a coach. You don't need a manager, you need a coach. And that's what we're really working to try and train a lot of our staff to do. That meetings are only effective if you can get that information moving. You can't just have somebody standing at the front of the room. You've got to have that interaction. Otherwise, don't waste our time. Send it in an email. So that's something that we have been pushing really hard is how do we improve our meetings? Because we spend so much of our time in rooms like this. We have these beautiful conference rooms, but we'll call 20 people together, and oftentimes when you just think about how much money are we spending, just the hourly wage of these 20 people, and you have one person sitting at the front of the room saying blah blah blah, we're doing this, it's not effective. So that, I think, would be one of our most effective ways. We're really pushing away from email as much as we can. it's just no longer effective. It used to be novel. People used to really like it. I think it has its place, but I don't think it's nearly as effective as it used to be. We do use Skype a lot. The instant message has become a format that we're really fans of. We're getting people to use that and use the camera on their laptop and go ahead and have that conversation. We're a big county. We've got 9,000 employees. We've got over 100 locations spread out over a 600 square mile area. We can't all be here at the government center in downtown Minneapolis. So the ability to be able to click on your desktop, this tool that every single person has, and look each other in the eye and have that conversation, see that body language, see the way that we're talking, has been really effective. And it's a learning curve. We're not there yet, but we do push people to go ahead and get comfortable with some of this new technology.
Do you find that in the community, because everyone has the opportunity to know their strengths, do you find that conversation is starting to bubble up quicker in conversations, and that people are starting to use it strategically in the relationships they're having, right? Strengths is best used in the context of a relationship. And so do you find they're actually using that framework and they're talking about it without a coach having to prompt them on it?
They are. And that honestly feels like one of our biggest successes. My boss was recently in a meeting with all of the leadership of Hennepin County, and they were talking strategy moving forward, strategic planning, and strengths started rolling into that conversation very naturally. It was not introduced in by anybody that's doing strengths work. It was the leaders who were talking about utilizing the strengths of their people, and it was very natural. And my boss came back and he was just very excited to let us know that it's up there at that level. And I know for a fact that down on the street, when we're walking around, people are using it. We have a gentleman who, by his own admission, hated strengths when he was introduced to it. He thought it was, he didn't like it.
No, we get, there are those. We get that feedback.
Yeah.
It's okay. Yeah.
But he is also, again, he's a statistician. He really wanted, show me the money, show me where it is. We gave him copies of the technical report. We asked him to dig in. We sat down and talked to him about it a little bit more. Now he's a huge fan. He tells me all the time, if I can learn somebody's top 5, I can find a way to work with them. And he said it's just fantastic because he used to struggle. There were people that he would work with that they just never could see eye to eye. Soon as he saw, take a look at what those top 5 are, then he understands that, that deliberative person needs time to look at, weigh all their options, different people like to take things a different route. And he suddenly feels like he just got a magic insight card,
Well, it is a little bit of a it puts you at an advantage in situations where people and being able to quickly get to the motivations, right? Quickly get to some of the values, quickly get to, and it's just a clue. You can't, you never want to get in a situation where you're judging people only on their top 5. But it gives you a framework, right? It gives you the ability to talk about some things that are similar. How big, you mentioned the county, about 1.2 million in the county, about 9,000 employees.
Right.
How long have you guys been doing this? And typically, how is it rolled out?
Well, it's kind of funny. We had probably 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, we had a couple people who kind of came across strengths on their own. We have Kathy, who's one of our certified coaches, had started with the county. She works in HR. She'd worked with Best Buy Corporation, which has been a strengths-based organization for many, many years. It's really ingrained. She got here and started using strengths language and was just amazed that no one knew what she was talking about. And so she started introducing it on a small scale, and it started gaining some attention. Chris Carter, who's also one of our strengths, she was working in central IT. She came across it. She liked it. The two of them found out that they were kind of doing similar things in their separate areas. They got together with a few other people, and they pitched the idea that Hennepin County should start looking at this as an overall opportunity for us. So that was the time that those two and I got, again, my boss called me in and he said, "Do you know anything about strengths finders?" And I said, "I got 5 words on the wall of my cube." And he said, "What do you think about it?" And I just said, "I don't know, corporate horoscope." And he said, "Well, the county is thinking about doing this on a larger scale. Do you want to go and get trained?" And I said, "You know what, I don't." And he said, "Well," he told me, "Steve, I have been in Hennepin County for a lot of years, and I've seen a lot of these initiatives. They're kind of flavor of the month. They get in there, they're fast and furious, and then they peter out." He said, "I'll tell you what, I'd rather have you go as a skeptic and come back. You tell me, is it worth our time and money, or is it not? If you say no, we won't waste our time. But if you come back, then you're prepared to be the guy that's going to help lead the charge." And so I took the challenge and was really so pleased to have my mind changed really over the course of that 5 days. I just gained a great new respect for it. I think it's a fantastic tool. And so really, the 3 of us, along with a handful of other kind of proponents, jumped in and started looking at how we were going to introduce it to the county. We're civil servants. We have to make sure that we are using taxpayers' money effectively. It oftentimes can be very hard to convince the stewards of that cash that we should be spending our training dollars and our training hours to introduce something new like this. So for us, we really had to start with kind of team sessions. Bang for the buck was the idea that we had groups that were willing to give us a couple hours to come in. We could at the time give them their assessment for not much money. It's a low cost investment, a couple hours, and roll that out. So for the past 2.5 years, that's been kind of the intro that we've had. Right now, I just looked up the number, excuse me while I find my glasses here. So right now, we've had almost 3,896 individual county employees who have participated in a team session. So it was a good way to get that intro. Since then, we realized that, a lot of times people want it to be the one and done. Oh yeah, we did that Strengths Finders thing. In fact, I told you this story once before, Jim, but I was in a meeting and a lot of people in the meeting didn't know that I was one of the strengths people. And we were talking about phasing out certain things that had lost their value and when you need to do that. And one of the managers in the room said, "Boy, you know what I'd like to phase out is that Strengths Finders." What, we did it that one time and now what else are why are we still doing it? And I looked at her and I said, "Well, what have you done with it since that first one?" And she said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, the county bought you a gym membership and they even invited some trainers to show you how to use the machines. But when's the last time you went to the gym?" Right? And she kind of stopped and I said, "Well, there's a personal responsibility. You're not going to lose weight. You're not going to get stronger unless you go to the gym and change your diet and do these kind of things." So we really came to the realization that we needed to help people find that next step. And a lot of that was kind of this idea of how do we get the managers and supervisors to ask us to come back? How do we empower them to feel like they can go in, look at some of the activities that are out there that they can lead themselves, simple things that they can take 10 minutes and talk about one strength at their team meeting. So really starting to empower individuals to start leading the charge on their own and keep those conversations going. We have been working very hard to really Hennepinize strengths, put a very Hennepin face on it. One of the projects we're working on right now that is really exciting, it's really fun. I'm sure everybody out there in the coaching world certainly has seen the Gallup produced 34 testimonials, the short, right? We decided that we would take 34 county employees and get them out there and have them talk about their strengths, make it more of a personalized story. So it was less about that, kind of generic, here is what woo is, and really have someone walk in the room and say, the way that my woo plays out is this, but we're doing it with individuals that people recognize and putting that face on it. And the great thing is, here, I'm going to share a screen cap with you. Okay, so these are just screen captures from some of those videos that we produce. These are all Hennepin County employees who are out there talking about their strengths. And the nice thing is, in this small group of 8, we've got one of our county commissioners. So we report to a group of elected commissioners. So the very top, Jan Callison down here is talking about her consistency. David Huff, who is our county administrator. So basically our CEO is talking about futuristic. But we reached out to people from across the organization. We have lawyers and doctors and snowplow drivers and everything in between. So nothing is one size fits all. And we really wanted to stress that it's not just the leadership. It's great that the leadership is behind it, but we've got people that are working at our service centers who are helping people get their driver's license tabs, those kind of things, talking about how their strengths help them in their day-to-day fashion. And people are really excited. It just makes it feel a little bit more like they own it. So that's been really great.
Yeah, a great way to kind of own the county. They're owning this. These are real people, real faces, real coworkers. A little bit of work involved in that, sitting them down, a script, working them through it. I'm sure several takes, right?
Few takes.
All those things kind of they take a little bit of work to get done. But that's a great representation of a way to kind of keep it fresh and keep it relevant. How are you posting those? Are those posted internally, or you put them on YouTube?
It's all internal. All of these things are internal. We make sure that we're doing some really heavy branding along with it, just to make sure that everybody knows this is Hennepin County. But we have internal websites that we use. HC Connect is the web page that you open up your browser, that's immediately where it lands. It's your news source, whatever else. And we'll be rolling those out. We've got 20 some shot. We're going to shoot another 10 of them on Monday. Our goal is at the first of the year that we're going to start rolling out 1 or 2 of these a week. They'll be there right on your homepage. And then we'll also post them out in our SharePoint site so people have access to them. They can watch them at their leisure as we go through. And then, we'll just kind of hope that word of mouth takes off and people want to keep
a great way to not reinvent the wheel too, in a lot of ways.
Exactly.
These work for us, but and to be honest with you, our 2-minute versions have kind of got a little long in the tooth, and we probably need to replace those. We've seen other people do this as well. There's a group in Singapore that has created these videos, folks that are local. Great. People love to see local faces, and I think that's super important. You have 5 Gallup certified trainers, certified coaches. But you've enlisted some help. So let's talk a little bit about what's the structure below them and what are you trying to do with that?
Yep. In fact, I just this morning, we've got a train the trainer session. We've got 22 more facilitators who are, we've been sitting down, we bring in different groups, and we've been training them. We now have 87 people who have gone through these full day trainings to get them comfortable enough that they can go in and facilitate a strengths team session. So those team sessions are really about some of the history behind Strengths Finders. They get in there, they learn, again, we spend some quality time on each of the 34 strengths, but really it's teaching them to facilitate, again, the conversation, because it's most effective when the teams start to talk about their strengths together. Really, we want these facilitators to be the people that can help the occasional confusion, the people that are confusing empathy with sympathy, the people that, the thing that I say a lot is Gallup's definition of these terms is often different than Webster's definition of these terms, and you sometimes get stuck. I had a gentleman who had empathy as his number 2, and he was angry about it. He told me, nope, absolutely not. I showed that to my wife, and she said, you're the least empathetic person I've ever met. And I asked him, I said, well, do you have your report there? Can you read that out loud for the group? And he started reading it, and he started going, well, oh, fine. If that's how you're going to define empathy, then sure. And everybody in the room was laughing. And it turns out this gentleman's an investigator, and he is truly an empath. Everyone in the room said he can walk into a room and just go, that guy's going to lie to me. That guy's telling the truth. That guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I mean, he truly can just read people like a book. But he really didn't want to be empathetic until we got him around there.
Well,
we have
his definition was different, right? He thought it was weakness, and it's actually it's a superpower, right? It's amazing to be able. I tell people that we have that same problem. I meet people with empathy all the time, and they're like, "Oh, I don't know," and I'm like, "No, you don't understand. You have an amazing superpower that the rest of us don't have." And so it's a great story.
Well, and it's been so interesting because we get out, and because we have such a wide diversity of departments and things that people do, it's been really fascinating to go into the county libraries, and you do start to see the trends, some real strategic thinkers over there. It's been really interesting to meet with law enforcement and talk to some of these folks and how often they have adaptability. And again, we had this big tough cop who sat with his arms crossed, and he was just, I'm not adaptable. I am not a go with the flow kind of guy. That's not what I do. And we said, no. Adaptability means you're MacGyver. Adaptability means that you're the guy who gets calm when the rest of the world is running around with their hair on fire. And once he started to see that, you could just see that light bulb click, and suddenly he was really proud of being adaptable. And that's those moments when you start to see that, and then your teams start to look at it, that they realize that each of these things are truly talents, and that they're all good things. There's none of them that are bad things, and they start to embrace it, and that's when we start to make progress.
You had showed me some other tools you guys are using to kind of keep this fresh and keep it in front of people. So what else, at the county level, I want to see what else you're using. And then I want to ask a few questions around performance metrics. Are you guys tracking any of this? So let's do tools first. If you want to share your screen with me, we'll talk about those tools.
So the county right now, again, we are we're having a sea change, really. A lot of our older employees are retiring. And so we need to find ways to be the employer of choice, that people want to come work for us. And how do we do that? We recently have been really working to define our core values, our 5 core values, and those are continuous improvement, customer service, diversity and inclusion, employee engagement, and workforce development. So we started thinking that strengths were really a natural fit to work on our core values. It's a way to, again, keep that core value conversation going, but also keep strengths, to find a way to make practical application for strengths. So the first module that we came up with is based on customer service. And so some of the tools that we created, we took some of the, let's move to the next one. So we took some familiar, again, coaches are going to be familiar with some of the tools that Gallup made, and we did a little bit of tweaking to make them, again, Hennepinized so that they fit for our teams. Again, these are internal. We don't send these out to other people. Our facilitators use them. But so the Best of Me, which I think is a great tool, coaches are used to seeing that. We took that and we asked people to look at it through a customer service lens. How do I utilize my woo as for good customer service. So we created this little sheet so people can start to think about it. And to help them along, we again took the 34 theme descriptions, or the strength descriptions and definitions, and we thought about it. We sat down and we just went, well, how might activators show up in a strengths, in a customer service lens? How do we do that? So that gives them a little bit of a cheat sheet so that we can say, these are just suggestions. We're not saying it's going to show up like this for you, but this is a way that we can kind of do it. So we've been taking in and just doing some of those things to, again, Hennepinize it. Now, the nice thing about the training that we created around customer service is we're going into teams. And at first we just kind of had generic problems that we said, let's think about this and talk about what you would do using your strengths. And it was okay. But then we realized we had a great opportunity. We have teams that obviously have active challenges, things that they're working on every single day. And so we decided that if a manager contacted us and said, I want to do that customer service module, we would get together with them for a good hour and sit down and say, we really want you to think about a specific challenge that your team has right now. Let's get it out there right out in the open, and we're going to spend a good chunk of our training time talking about that specific problem. How are we going to find ways to move forward? And once we started doing that, when teams really started to recognize that there are ways that they can sit down and really think about their own strengths, and they start to look at, certain people will say, oh my God, I never would have thought of doing it that way. I don't want to be, that's too touchy-feely for me. You harmony people can do that. You empathy people can do that. I want to be the activator. Let's just get things going. And once they started doing that and the team started to think about it, they started seeing these problems in a different light. And it's kind of amazing to see how many people all of a sudden realize that, how do you eat an elephant? Start with one bite. And it's been really just dynamite to see, and I think it's been popular. Now we're trying to do these other core values. We're working on the modules. Some are easier than others, but we really want to personalize it. Again, if we can make this real to me and you, then it's going to be more effective.
Yeah, I really love your approach to starting with core values, because the values oftentimes define the direction.
Absolutely.
And then you can take the direction and you can impose the themes or on top of that to say, hey, okay, so what I love the fact is you didn't say to be a good customer service rep, you have to have these themes, right?
No,
you
exactly.
said, hey, across all 34, there are elements where that can be utilized and that can actually benefit you. And here are some ways we've seen it. I also love that you kind of said it's a living document. So it's what we kind of come up with for now. I imagine as you are working in the next months and years, you're always open to change something, right? If something's different or you learn something, are you constantly updating what you have?
Constantly. And again, we try to really personalize it for each team. So it changes day to day to day. And the more flexible we can be with it, the more that we find that we're effective with it. It's really, one of the great things is these conversations, I think, help managers and supervisors who are so used to saying, by the book, we've got to do it this way. We really need to do it this way. Recognize that there are a million different paths to reach that goal. Figure out what your goal is, and then let your staff find the best way to reach it. The way that's personal to them. And, it's kind of the textbook definition of employee engagement. Give me challenging work and some autonomy, and I'm going to be engaged. And this has been great. I think that even just supervisors saying, I didn't know that guy had it in him.
Yeah, and when you let them do it the way that works best for them, and they're most judicious or the most efficient or in the most engaging way. Before I want to move to that idea of engagement and measurement, because a lot of people, you've said words like touchy-feely and some of those kinds of things. One of the big problems with what we do is sometimes we come at this only from a strengths perspective, and we don't think that these strengths actually change productivity numbers. And so have you guys put anything into place? What are you using to measure the impact? Because at the end of the day, we're doing this to make a difference, right?
Right.
In productivity. What are you guys doing?
Well, the biggest thing right now, we've been tracking, again, numbers of who's participating. And then we're tracking the numbers of who's doing follow-up sessions. So a lot of it is tracking teams in the way that they're utilizing our services. We have been, that's we're about 2 years into the process right now. And so we are actually actively seeking ways to start to get some of these statistics. And the nice thing is we've got a lot of good statisticians. So we're working with them to try and figure out ways how we can measure this. Like a lot of places, I think that we have a bit of survey fatigue. We like to ask each other how we're doing an awful lot. So we're trying to find other innovative ways, and I'll put it out there to all you people in coaching land. You let me know what you're doing and how you're tracking some of this would be fantastic, because again, we're I think just getting past our introductory phase, and we need to figure out how we can track those things ourselves. So
yeah, well, and I always say start gathering numbers is to get your baselines, and you never know what because you're already doing a lot of survey internally. Because there's a lot of numbers, because you're a government organization, there are certain mandated numbers that are tracked. I think of average hours worked. I think of sick time, right? I think of productivity. How many, I assume you guys have your own maintenance crews. So how many miles of road are paved each year? How much in construction costs? I don't think a lot of people think about those metrics. They kind of, we got a great tool called the Q12, which people measure those engagement numbers, but I think I think county, city, state governments have all these great numbers when we think about internal. What's your internal turnover rates? What are your sick hours? What are your right? And begin to. And the good news is they're already tracked for you. You don't have to do anything new. You can just start pulling those numbers.
That's great, and I think those are definitely things that we can do and should start doing. And the nice thing is, again, our HR department does track all those numbers. They've got some really good information, and our head of HR is a huge strengths proponent. He is he's a big fan. I get to go up there and work with that team an awful lot, and there's some great people in that department, and they like strengths, so that would be great. Well,
we always say there's that saying, you have to inspect what you expect, and so I always encourage groups begin sooner than later to start tracking things, whether they move the needle or not. You may not know until you've gotten a couple years. You've got a couple years under your belt. You've probably got some stats, and then start asking some questions. Hey. We're seeing our sick hours decrease. Why? What is that an anomaly? What's happening? What's that doing? We know folks that are engaged in their role and what they're doing are sick less often, or they're not calling in sick. Right? You know what I mean? And so there's some great stats. I don't think you have to do much. A lot of people feel like they've got to roll out a big, employee engagement survey. Certainly we have one that you could use if you want to do it, but there are some stats that are already there. So that's pretty cool. I'll be interested to see, I asked the Rhode Island guys, Kevin and Mike, what are you guys tracking? And, they've got some goals of a certain number of people taking it, right? They are tracking productivity in the state. We do have a state-driven survey that we do, most engaged by state across the United States. They're super proud. That went from last to nearly first.
I know it.
And so that's, I think they can claim that. And Steve, don't you think that's important in what you're doing? It's not just about self-awareness, but to be able to say we're making a difference, we're making progress.
It really is. And it's, of course, we are asked to justify it every year when we come in and say that we would like to do this. We would like to spend this much. People are going to ask us to justify the work that we're doing. And, word of mouth is great, but numbers are numbers, and people like numbers, especially people with pocketbooks like numbers. So it's great. But, our CFO is one of the people who's out there on one of our 34 videos. So, it's nice because I think we are people are seeing the response, but it would be nice to have the numbers to back it up.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier on some skeptics, and I actually think
Yeah.
skeptics are helpful because they keep us honest. If we don't have people always questioning, this can kind of become groupthink.
Yep.
I think strengths, even in a strengths methodology, can get a little cultish or a little groupie-ish.
Sure.
If we're not careful. We love the skeptics. Have you had, in a city, a state, local government? Oftentimes there's privacy issues. We deal with things we don't have to deal with in a corporation, because the corporation says we're going to do this or you're not going to work here. That's a little harder to do in government. Have you guys run into those kinds of situations where people are concerned about their privacy or some of those kinds of things?
Yeah, we have, and it's been a challenge because we have, again, the diversity of what people do. We have a lot of unions. And we've always been a very pro-union organization. We do really well, and I think we've got good relationships. We did early on have some misinformation get out there. And there was a newsletter that hit that talked about how StrengthsFinders was going to be stored in your HR file, that it was going to be mandatory, that, managers were going to use it to decide whether or not you were going to get promoted and it was a little frustrating because none of those things are true, obviously. The county does not, we encourage people to take StrengthsFinders assessment, but it's not required. No one shares it. HR has no access to people's strengths. No one has access to your top 5 unless you choose to share your top 5. We don't use it for hiring. We don't use it for promotion, other than the fact that we really encourage managers and supervisors to use that conversation in helping people create a development plan of where they want to be in 6 months, 5 years, 20 years. So the tough thing was, because it got printed, it kind of comes back up. And so we contacted the union, we talked to them. They've been great. They are now fans, but we still have individuals who come back and say, nope, I'm not doing it. I'm not going to do it. So it is a challenge. And again, we hope that as we are high visibility, as we have, again, showing the videos of their coworkers who are out there talking about it, people are going to start to recognize it, that it's a good thing. Yeah. And you should be proud of it.
I think that also breaks down giving folks the option, letting them come to this place, letting it being. I think that actually breaks down the fatigue of the one and done.
Yep.
Like when you have everybody do it and it's a big gigantic effort, and hey, for some organizations this works great, posters and you celebrate it, but maybe in a role there in the county government, it makes sense to just roll it out slowly over time, let people come to it, and when they see their friends or they see their coworkers using it and they go, oh, well, that kind of makes sense, maybe I'll give that a try. Steve, I'm always amazed. I had this I was on Facebook this morning working with our community, and I'm always surprised. There's 2 ends of the spectrum. There's those people who don't ever want to take it, and then there's people who want to take it like 100
over and over and over. Yeah, I know.
You're like, what if I take it again? And I'm like, man, we can't even get some of these people to take it for the first time.
I know it's true.
Yeah, it's kind of great that way. It kind of in a final question to you, as we go our time goes super faster. I can't believe how fast this goes. It always does every time. What are you hoping for in the future as you look out ahead over the next couple of years? By the way, let me congratulate you on your thinking in years, in terms of years instead of months, right? Or even a point in time. You guys have been doing this a couple of years. This is great. But as you look at the next 2 or 3 years, kind of what are you thinking? What are you hoping for?
Well, we are now offering every single new employee gets a code. They can take the assessment if they choose to. They also have the opportunity to have a one-on-one with one of our facilitators to really go through their report so they have some understanding. My hope is that we're starting to see, 95% of those new employees taking that opportunity. You said
95%.
Yeah.
Of the employees, it's compulsory. I mean, it's voluntary.
It's voluntary.
We're getting a 95% return.
We're not yet. That's what I would love to see.
Where do you think you're at now?
Right now, we're at about 30%.
Okay, well, that's good. So you got a ways to go.
One of the things that's really nice, in fact, this morning, the 20-some people we have taking the facilitation, a huge group of them were people who do onboarding for one of our largest departments, and I just think what a great opportunity. The first people you meet when you walk in the door are going to encourage you to go ahead and take that assessment and then talk to somebody about that assessment. So I think it's, again, when folks come in, if their supervisor in that first week, that first 10 days said, have you got your top 5 yet? We're a strengths-based organization, and you're going to learn a lot about us talking about your strengths. So that would really be my main goal, is when it becomes so natural, when it becomes just ingrained in the culture, that those conversations are not forced, they're just very natural, and they happen all the time.
With 17 million people already have taken the assessment, do you find some employees are coming in already with it? And do you have a way to just incorporate that in when they get here?
Yeah, we do. And we certainly encourage people to, if you've already taken it, to share that information. It's really popular. The University of Minnesota right now, one of the biggest universities in the country, gives Strengths Finders to all of their students. So we have a huge number of young people coming in for their early in their career. They've already talked about strengths. They're already interested in strengths. So it's kind of funny. It is starting to be a lot more common to have new staff who have already taken it. And I think that trend is going to only keep growing. And it's great. We really ask them to share those with us and utilize them. So.
No, that's great. You've got some understanding before they even come in, some coaching you don't necessarily have to do. We get really excited about colleges and universities that take that approach. Because those students already have a great idea who they are before they're coming in, and then you guys can take advantage of that as well. Do you find you're getting some new employees that may even want to be facilitators and coaches? Once they hear about it?
Yeah, all the time. And those one-on-one debrief sessions have been just wonderful, because again, it just gives them that personal conversation. They really get to look at that insight report, talk to somebody about it, gain some new insight, and the number of times that I've had those sessions with people, then they've walked in and they just said, how can I become more involved in this? I want to find out what the next steps are. And I, oftentimes will say, well, first things, go back to your team and talk about it. Go to your supervisor and talk about it. Then come and join us at one of our strengths hours. We do brown bag sessions around strengths all the time that are open to everybody. Come and join some of those conversations. If you have ideas that you want to push going forward, if you have an idea about strengths that we could utilize, get a hold of us, because we want to hear it and we want to put it into practice.
Oh, it's a great idea, taking advantage of who you have available when they have it. That's a strengths-based organization. Even using strengths to improve the strengths community. It's a great idea. Steve, if people had questions, they wanted to find out more, maybe they wanted to collaborate in some ways, or they work for a state or a local or regional organization, what's the best way for them to get more information, or how would they contact you?
Well, I know that I just ripped on email a little bit earlier, but of course, I'm happy to share my email. It's steve.sweary, that's SWEERE, at hennepin.us. So that's the easiest way, and certainly feel free. I would love to hear from people out there in Strengths Land, to hear what you're doing in your organizations, and answer any questions that I'm able to. I'll give you my phone number. I'm not at my desk very often, but leave me a voicemail and I'm happy to give you a buzz back. I'm at 612-348-0915. And certainly give me a call, leave a message, make sure you leave your return phone number, and I'll do my best to get back to you at any time. I love collaboration. I love meeting people and talking to people and hearing stories.
That's great. And I know I'm hearing from more and more organizations that are thinking about this. We have a lot of government organizations thinking about this and doing it. And so, Steve, thanks for taking the time today to be a part of it. Some great tools. There was some great feedback from the chat room. Lots of noteworthy lots of notes were taken today, and we'll
Great.
just thank Cheryl Pace in advance. She's going to take really good notes. They're going to make their way into the show notes when this program goes live. So if you're listening to the recorded version of this as a podcast, you might want to head over to the coaches blog, go to coaching.gallup.com, and look for the session. There'll be some great show notes. We have been producing really good show notes for each one of these Call to Coach programs. If you didn't know that, if you haven't looked, you might want to head out back to the blog and take a peek, and there'll be some great notes. Steve, again, thanks. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's been my great pleasure. I appreciate getting the chance to chat.
Great. Hang tight with me 1 second as I wrap it up. I'll remind everyone to take full advantage of all the resources we have available at the Gallup Strength Center. Just gallupstrengthcenter.com. Send us your questions. Oh, by the way, I think I said this early, but there's big change coming to Strength Center this weekend. You guys are going to like it. So I can't tell you exactly what it is, but it's coming. It's going to be awesome. So check it out Saturday or Sunday. Well, yeah. Okay. So if you're interested in being a guest blogger with us as well, we are taking, if you got 400 to 600 words around strengths that you want to share with us, send those to coaching@gallup.com. Put guest blogger in the subject line. We'll get that routed over to Micah so we can take a look at it. Don't forget, you can catch the recorded audio and video of this program as well as all the past ones. Hundreds of hours of free professional development for you is available off of our blog. Go to coaching.gallup.com. If you're interested in becoming a Gallup certified strengths coach, we mentioned that here in the program a little bit. You can see a list of all of our courses that lead to that certification, our ASC course that does it. It's available on our courses site, though we don't make it too hard to find, courses.gallup.com, or you can fill out the contact form right there on the page and someone will call you back. If you found this helpful, we'd ask that you'd share it. We want to thank everyone for joining us today, and we'll look forward to the next Call to Coach. And with that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.